What is up, you muffin munching muggles? Welcome to Fiction and Reality, where we help you, yes, you, become the most devilishly gifted human being that you know you are and that you knew you always could be. So, I hear that you want to learn how to write about characters. Well, to do that, you must first understand that every character needs a philosophy. What is life? Are we just simply existing? Are we just born to die, chum up slop like pigs, love a little, kiss a little, watch our parents grow old?
Keep your hand to yourself. You hit me and Jesus, I'll knock you right out.
Our children grow old, our spouse grow old, ourselves grow old. And then eventually, meet the Undertaker. Your character needs a philosophy. Now, I know a lot of what people hear when they hear the word philosophy, they shunt towards something like Socrates or Plato. You know, the only thing that I know is that I know nothing. But philosophy is much, much more than that. Having your own philosophy and doing an intricate dissection of your own worldview, cleaving time for self-introspection and analysis of your own values, asking why you believe the things you believe are right or wrong, why you have devoted loyalty or ascribed to a string of ideologies and values and decided to move them to action is what makes you who you are and what makes your characters who they are. And since you are the one whose values, beliefs, and compass of morality should reflect through the thoughts, words, and actions of the characters you create, it's imperative that you refine and sharpen your doctrine or worldview to mirror the spectrum of ideologies that you want to portray to your reader. Remember that we aren't just simply talking about names smothered on a piece of paper. Your character should be in some way able to forge an emotional link with your reader by presetting their own values and beliefs through the thoughts, words, and actions. Of course, leaving it up to the reader how they want to interpret that, right? Where do I start, you ask? Well, by simply asking character development questions. We can start with a few starters to jumpstart you, right? If outlining has you in a hang-up, maybe start with a general archetype your character can assume. Then, of course, add your own unique spin or touch on it as not to make it too cliche. Maybe they're a swindler, a thief, a junkie, a drunk, a tyrant, a loyalist, a free spirit, a warrior, an all-bright hero, or a dastardly villain. And I will provide a link of some examples of various archetypes that you can draw from. But here's a warning to not ensnare and trap yourself within that limited frame. Add your own special touch, or else you'll risk starving them of a chance to spindle deep moral ambiguity and adopt a personality that is unique to them and them alone. Next, you may want to try progressing to some questions, right? Maybe touch up a little bit on the backstory, start framing that blueprint. What's your character's name? The meaning behind it. Where are they from? What was their childhood like growing up? What were some cherished memories they have and why? What are some malignant memories they have or try to avoid and why? Was there some inflection point, some monumental event that shifted them from their course of life and values? Were they always the same person, threading towards becoming more of what they already are? Or have they changed? What are the most impactful events in shaping their beliefs and values? What do they want out of life and why? What's their perception of people and how do they treat people? Do they have a support system? Do they yearn for a support system? Is there a support system that's responsible for their current temperament or that they hold responsible? Now we'll move on to what's, in my own personal opinion, the golden key to keeping the reader engaged in your characters and eager to track their development throughout your story. I call it fixing the scales of good and evil. I tend to find in various media sources, whether it be through sci-fi movies, fantasy or fiction novels, or simply in news articles, that editors, creators, or what have you may stick to certain archetypes in a by-the-book manner. Let's take, Anakin, for example. Is he really a bad guy because he murdered a few Padawans? I should use another example. Okay, Walter White. Some may say he's generally bad because he cooks meth. I could see that. And Vito Corleone from The Godfather, who used unethical practices in order to provide some stability for his business.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Now, this isn't entirely false, but it isn't entirely true either. These are characters wrought with deep moral ambiguity and may also be described as family men with devout senses of loyalty and honor to their own selfish desire. Characters portrayed as if the scales of good and evil never in sync, evenly balanced, always either leering towards the black or white, the good and evil, unfortunately run the risk, though not always depending on what you need from your story, of being unilateral. Of course, if that's the route you want to take, then that's fine. It's all a matter of perspective. It depends on what you need from your story. But I tend to find that writing is more engaging when it reflects the gradient of those scales. There should be some internal conflict that your character undertakes to find the balance within themselves. And that's not to say that they have to be constantly questioning whether or not what they're doing is right or wrong. Tell me something. Do you truly fall in love with characters who are unilaterally good or evil? That is, they have one course set for them from the start, and their only objective is to displace those in their way. Think about this. Why do people love Thanos so much? Because he was right? No. But because we perceive the truths in what we deem both moral and immoral in his actions. Thanos simply just had the kahunas to take things to the extremes when no one else would. And what about Batman? The guy literally runs around Gotham City dressed like a bat, beating the ever-loving crap out of people. But the actions he takes are somewhat always bittersweet, leering on the line of justice and immorality, whatever justice is, assigned by the law. Many can identify with Bruce Wayne's backstory, maybe a little child who loses his parents to thralls of greed and unchecked crime. But what really hooks people to Batman is that he walks the gray, the line between black and white, his actions rarely veering to either extreme of the scale. He's a vigilante. He's constantly locked in this internal conflict to keep a hold of his innate values to never kill, while simultaneously breaking the law by taking justice into his own hands and bending it to its will. Think about this. How many times has his allegiance to his values forced him to let the Joker and other Arkham Asylum criminals free to roam about Gotham City again? And another example I have, maybe my favorite example of fixing the scales of good and evil, is V from Vendetta. A resistance against a totalitarian police state that uses terrorist-style warfare to oppress those who would dare uproot its tyranny. And V is the embodiment of the resistance and rebellion that assumes the role of absolute justice, seeking to unlatch the chains of suppression to achieve freedom, no matter how many lives he must take to achieve it, no matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice. He's a character that calls you to question, what is justice? What is freedom? And who is the one who's ordained with the right to control such things, if anyone is at all? So, what's the key takeaway here? Ferret out what your character believes is moral or immoral and implement some mechanism of conflict that causes them to tip between the scales of good and evil, or rather show progression of the values they adopt and the trials they've uprooted to overcome and draw towards an ultimate conclusion. You want to try avoiding being inanimate and unidimensional. For example, characters like Superman. Avoid being inanimate and set goals. Superman's cape-flying hero with unwavering moral code, who stubbornly fights for his call to justice and scope of truth without much internal conflict. Generally speaking, his character is defined by his superpowers and commitment to do good, rather than exploring any deep personal struggles or flaws. The simplicity of his role as this almighty savior and symbol of hope sort of constrains his development beyond his heroic actions. And we can talk about Rey from Star Wars. her character often embodies a straightforward, the chosen one archetype, right? Whose primary role is to overcome dark forces without significant internal conflict or moral ambiguity. Despite her roles in the trilogy, right, her motivations and background are presented in a way that emphasize her as some beacon of hope and power, right? Darth Vader. His character is initially presented with limited exploration of his past or internal conflicts, focusing primarily on his role as a dark enforcer of an empire. While his backstory is later explored in the original context, Vader's primary function is as an imposing antagonist who lacks deeper moral ambiguity. Are we starting to see a pattern here? We're starting to see a pattern. You want your characters to have an objective to pursue, trudging through the muck and mud that is both external and internal conflict. It's simply achieving their goal. It's not just simply achieving their goal or not, but the tussle of moral ambiguity that they will partake in the journey to achieve whatever accolade it is that they are striving for. In other words, it's the climb, the journey to the highest peak that reels your reader in, like a fish clamping down on the hook. It's the strenuous trials that display a state of moral instability that keeps your characters' engines well oiled and switching gears, not necessarily if they make it to the top of the mountain or not. Moving on to other ways you can sculpt and help refine your character's philosophy. Consider giving your characters flaws. Perhaps you want to keenly understand what faults your characters may have. That is to say, what is it they are neglecting or overlooking with respect to their thoughts, words, and actions? How many work to their benefit or are retroactive to the cause? This, of course, is a prime way to help stir some internal conflict within your character that can then sort of move you towards external conflict through a mounting tension. Try asking yourself, could some of these faults they have in the non-resolution of certain conflicts that arise as a result of them explain some of the actions they take? And just a small note on sculpting a physical picture, which I'll go more into depth in on other future videos. In terms of painting a physical picture, make sure the clothes speak to your character's personality. Instead of asking what your character is wearing, ask yourself why they would wear it. Consider giving them some unique physical quirk. Hey Gretchen, have you seen my 6th toe? Or maybe their nose is shaped like a shovel or a spear. Give them a tick or quirk, like they start randomly cursing whenever they get anxious or nervous. Maybe they carry some special item around with them. Is there a reason they do this? What does it mean to them? Now, in closing, I want you to remember that your character is not just a two-dimensional name that's barren and parched. They should latch on emotionally to the reader in some shape or form. And I hope with the flow of information I provided you, you can achieve this. With that, I hope that you found this helpful in some way. I'll leave a link to my socials below. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. And be sure to tell me what has been the most difficult part of describing and coming up with a character for you. And with that, remember, if ever you're lost in a forestry of words, strip your mind from fantasy and look to the window of the world. And there your mind will run free.